Okay, let's go over these you try problems. So in the first here, we've got this congruency statement, and we want to match up the corresponding angles and sides. So I'm just going to start with the angles, going letter by letter. The first letter is W, and then the first letter here is E. So that means that angle W is congruent to angle E. Then we can look at the second letters. This middle one is X, and then the middle one here is F. So that means that angle X is congruent to angle F. Now we get to the last letter, angle Y is congruent to angle G. Remember, we're just matching them up in the order they are in the congruency statement. Now for the sides, we do the same thing, except remember we need 2 letters instead of just 1. So like I go with the orange and the red, right? That's WXEF. So WX is congruent to EF. The next one, what if I start with X? If I start with X, based on this right here, that means my second one has to start with F. All right, then it goes from X to Y. Well, Y is corresponding with G. So if I go XY, then I have to go FG. So there's different ways to approach these problems, and that was just what I was trying to show you there. Our last side, I could go YW or I could go WY. Again, you're just listing these sides in order that their points are corresponding. So if I decide to go W to Y here, that's totally allowed. But when I write my second statement, I have to go E to G. All right, and how about another congruency statement for the triangles? And yours might be different than mine. I'm just going to write them both backwards. So WXY, I'm going to do YXW, is congruent to, and now remember I said I went backwards, Y to X to W. So in the second triangle, I also have to go backwards, G, F, E. All right, now, let's do an example here, and hopefully you had a second to try some of these at first. If you didn't get far, that's okay, because this is our first example where we have pictures. So to approach a problem that has an image, I am going to start by marking the congruent and corresponding pieces before I try to write anything in A through H. So for example, I have my congruency statement right here. Based on that, I know that K is corresponding with A because they're both first. What that tells me then is that the angles at K and A are corresponding and congruent. Then it goes from K to P, right? K to P is next. So from K to P, this line here is the same as A to Y. And now, so we're at the second letter, P and Y. These ones are also corresponding, and their angles are congruent. Remember, the number of swoops shows us which angles are congruent, but another thing that's important, I think this is a different color. Another thing that's important, on the side lengths, they have tick marks. So remember, there's the swoops, there's the tick marks. The next then letter, we go from P to M, and then Y to C. So that means those two sides are congruent. And M and C must be corresponding points because they're the last letters. So M here, 1, 2, 3, and C, 1, 2, 3. Show that those are corresponding and congruent. And then we've got our last line here. Notice I'm connecting the green and the blue in both of the two triangles because green and blue are corresponding. So So that's how we can read the statement and show it visually. But now let's fill in the blanks. So the first one says KM. What is KM congruent to? Well, let's look at the image. KM is this line segment right here. Notice it has 3 tick marks. So K to M is congruent to this side in the other triangle. Now, what's really tricky here is that I have to label my endpoints in corresponding order. So KM starts with the blue and goes to the green. So when I list this second side, I have to start with the blue and go to the green. So I would have to list it as a line segment AC. It would be incorrect to say CA. Now, like we were doing before, we can use the congruency statement to answer these as well. So for example, the next one, CY, I could do like I did A. But if I just look at the congruency statement, I see that C is the last letter and Y is the middle. So if I follow that same pattern in the other triangle congruency statement, I go to the last letter, so M is first, and then go to the middle letter, P. That tells me that CY is congruent to MP. And we can do the same thing with PK. So I start at P, which is the center, and go to K, which is the first letter. And then repeat in the second triangle. So Y is the center, go back to A, the first letter. So we would say YA. All right, now the angles we kind of already did together, right? We marked them. Angle Y is corresponding with which angle? Well, we've got them marked there, the purple ones. It is corresponding with angle P. And remember, we knew that because Y and P were the middle letters of the 2 triangles. How about angle K? Angle K is the one in blue right up here. Angle K is corresponding with the other blue, A. Notice K was first and so was A. So we know angle K is congruent to angle A. Now this last one here, notice it lists our angle as 3 letters, A, C, Y. In order to do this, you need to trace, starting with your pencil at A, trace to the letter C, and then trace to Y. That's asking for this angle right here. What would be the corresponding angle in the other triangle? Well, you want to match up the points the same way we did with a triangle congruent statement. So like when we wrote all 3 of them, remember we just match it up. So A is the first letter in the first triangle. So that means I should start with K now. Then we went to C, which was the last letter of the triangle. So I should go to M next. And last was the center letter Y, and so it should be the center letter P. If you want to check this, then trace over KMP. K is here, M is here, P is here. Did that accurately list this angle M that we wanted? Yes, it did. All right, the last 2 are just practice with the congruent triangle statements. So we'll start with the first one, which is MPK. That's just backwards, M to P to K. So in order to match that, I'm going to start at the back, C to Y to A. All right, let's do the last one here. So YAC goes from Y, the middle, to A, the first letter, to C, the last letter. So I repeat the same pattern. P, the middle letter, to K, the first letter, to M, the last letter. So I'd say triangle PKM.